You once said the whole situation was a disaster. You weren't exaggerating. You called it the worst experience of your life. So what actually happened? Eddie Van Halen was completely out of control, so far gone on alcohol and drugs that people around him feared the worst. He was in such bad shape that it genuinely seemed like he might not make it. Eddie may be celebrated today as a guitar god, but not everyone he crossed paths with admired him. His revolutionary playing changed rock music forever, but behind the scenes he created rivalries, started feuds, and rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Some musicians respected his talent, but despised his ego. Others were worn down by his competitive and fiery personality. The reasons so many rockers couldn't stand Eddie Van Halen are as dramatic as his most electrifying solos. Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit. Among the countless wild stories in rock history, few are as strange or as shocking as the tale of Eddie Van Halen allegedly pointing a gun at Fred Durst after a disastrous jam session. Yes, that actually happened, or at least that's how the story has been told. It all started when a record label executive attempted one of the strangest pairings ever: Eddie Van Halen and Fred Durst. Eddie, one of the most influential guitarists of all time, met the backwards cap-wearing frontman of Limp Bizkit at a party. Eddie floated the idea of collaborating. Durst, dripping with sarcasm, joked, "It would be hilarious. The greatest guitar player ever, playing with the worst band ever." Despite the backhanded comment, they set up a jam session, but from the moment it began, it was doomed. To Eddie, who took music seriously and carried himself with the instincts of a perfectionist, the session felt like being a scholar surrounded by kindergarteners. But what pushed him over the edge wasn't the music. It was the clouds of marijuana smoke filling the room, a habit Eddie despised. He abruptly walked out, leaving behind some of his most valuable guitars and amps. When Eddie tried contacting Durst the next day to get his equipment back, he got no response. Hours passed. Then a full 24 hours. Eddie's frustration finally exploded. According to video director Andrew Bennett, who detailed the story in his book Eruption in the Canyon, Eddie stormed to Durst's house in a military-style vehicle equipped with gun mounts. He stepped out with a firearm in hand. When Durst opened his door, he found Eddie pointing the gun directly at his signature red cap. Eddie reportedly shouted, "I put my gun to that stupid Fing red hat of his and said, 'Where's my stuff, motherfucker?'" Durst panicked. He immediately ordered one of his crew members to bring Eddie's equipment out of the house, while Eddie stood guard, keeping the gun pointed in Fred's direction. Neither Eddie nor Durst have publicly confirmed the story, but Bennett's account spread quickly through the rock world. Many fans felt it perfectly captured Eddie's unpredictable side, brilliant on the guitar, but fiery and unforgiving toward people he didn't respect. Fred Durst, known for his attitude and controversy, was an easy target for Eddie's temper. Randy Rhoads' few rivalries in rock history spark as much debate as that between Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads. Both were young, both were gifted innovators, and both pushed guitar playing to new heights in the late 70s and early 80s. They shared similarities: classical influences, blazing fast technique, and groundbreaking use of two-handed tapping. Fans constantly compared them, which only fueled a real-life rivalry. Eddie was already a major star when asked about Rhoads in the early 80s. Instead of praising him, Eddie dismissed him. In a 1982 interview, Eddie delivered his most infamous line: "Everything he did, he learned from me. I don't think he did anything I hadn't already done." To Eddie, Randy wasn't an equal. He was an imitator. Rolling Stone made matters worse when reviewing Ozzy Osbourne's 1981 album Diary of a Madman. They called Rhoads a junior league Eddie Van Halen, implying he had talent but lacked originality. But fans and fellow musicians disagreed. Randy had a deep classical background and crafted melodic, precise compositions. Where Eddie favored wild improvisation, Randy brought structure and musical theory. Even Ozzy Osbourne stepped in years later. In a 2022 interview, Ozzy pushed back against Eddie's claims. "I heard Eddie said he taught Randy all his licks. He never did. Randy never had a nice thing to say about Eddie. They were rivals." The tension between them didn't start when Randy joined Ozzy. It went back to the late 70s on the Sunset Strip, when Quiet Riot and Van Halen were both fighting for attention in the same clubs. According to Andre Rellis, director of the documentary Randy Rhoads, Reflections of a Guitar Icon, the rivalry was already alive and well before Randy ever auditioned for Ozzy. Michael Anthony. For decades, Michael Anthony's powerful backing vocals and rock-solid bass playing were vital to Van Halen's sound. Yet behind the scenes, his position in the band was never secure. The rift between Anthony and the Van Halen brothers became one of rock's ugliest internal battles. The tension can be traced back to 1984, when Van Halen reached peak commercial success. Despite being there from the beginning, helping form the band and play countless small clubs, Anthony's value was suddenly questioned. Eddie, Alex, and David Lee Roth began arguing that Anthony didn't deserve an equal share of profits. As the band's financial success skyrocketed, Anthony found himself excluded from major decisions. Eventually, the brothers pressured him to sign away his rights to songwriting credits and future royalties, retroactively removing him as an equal partner. He was reduced to a salaried employee. Former manager Noel Monk later condemned the move, calling it the most despicable thing I'd seen in 40 years in the music business. Things worsened when Van Halen reunited with Sammy Hagar in 2004. Eddie initially wanted Anthony gone. Hagar refused unless Anthony joined the tour. Anthony agreed, but only after accepting a major pay cut and surrendering all rights to the Van Halen name and logo. Then, in 2006, the band announced that Eddie's teenage son, Wolfgang Van Halen, would take over as bassist. Anthony wasn't told. He learned about it online, just like the fans. He later said, "I'm a little miffed they're calling it a Van Halen reunion. If I were dead and they needed someone to fill in, fine. But this is not a reunion." Anthony never spoke to Eddie again after the 2004 tour, not once in 16 years. Sammy Hagar reconciled with Eddie before his death, but Anthony never got that chance. Sammy Hagar. When David Lee Roth left Van Halen in 1985, many thought the band was finished, but bringing in Sammy Hagar revitalized the group. The chemistry was instant. The Van Hagar era produced 4 multi-platinum albums: 5150, 1986, 0812, 1988, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, 1991, Balance, 1995. All of them hit #1. But behind the scenes, cracks grew. During the recording of Balance, 1994-95, Hagar, now a new father, wanted time with his baby. Eddie and Alex wanted to get back to work immediately. The conflict escalated into a war of personalities. By 1996, the partnership collapsed. Eddie insisted Hagar quit. Hagar insisted he was fired. In his memoir Red, Hagar recalled the moment. "It was Father's Day, Sunday morning, 9:10 a.m. I was lying in bed with my new baby when the phone rang." Eddie said, "You want to be a solo artist? Go be one. We're getting Dave back." Hagar felt betrayed, not only dumped during a life-changing moment, but replaced by Roth without warning. Hagar later described Eddie during this period as physically deteriorating: thin, hunched, drinking wine straight from the bottle, missing teeth, recovering from cancer surgery. He regretted writing about Eddie's struggles so bluntly. When Eddie died in 2020,